This is the Journal Star editorial board endorsement interview with City Council member Roy Christensen, who is running for re-election to an at-large seat on the City Council. We will just quickly introduce ourselves, Roy, and then we will launch into this, but we appreciate you being with us here today. I'm Dave Bundy, editor at the Journal Star, but you know that. Kent?
Hey, Roy, Kent, Walgamot. How
Hey,
you
Kent.
doing?
Good to see you again.
Robbie?
Hi, I'm Robbie Estes. I'm the controller at the Journal Star, and I've been on the editorial board about 2.5 years.
Hey, Robbie.
He's the financial guy, so he's the responsible one here. John, not that John's irresponsible, but John?
The irresponsible one here, John Schreier. I'm one of our assistant city editors. I've been on the editorial board just shy of 4 years now.
Hey, John.
All right. Well, Roy, the first question, we've had not exactly the front row seat you've had, but in the newsroom, we've had pretty good seats for everything that's happened in the last year and even earlier than that. It looks like a hard time to be serving in any kind of public service or elected office. Why do you want to keep doing this? And what is it about you that makes you the best candidate?
Well, yeah, I've questioned myself. Why do I want to do this again? Because you're right. The last 12 months had some pretty miserable moments in it. But I look at this and ask myself, if it wasn't me doing this, who would it be? And would it be they be better prepared? Would they be more knowledgeable? And you know, pretty much I'd have to say no to almost anybody who I look out there who's wanting to do it. I have more experience. This is finishing my 8th year on the council. I have a pretty good command of what's going on. I have a really good relationship with all the department heads in the city. Very good relationship with the mayor's office and with businesses and business groups throughout the community. They know me, I know them, and they have really good access to me and me to them. So I feel like I'm qualified to do the job. I've proven that I can do the job. I know what's going on in City Hall and can represent my constituents well. And the other thing I got to say at this point is when I talk about constituents, I don't represent the people who voted for me because I have no idea who they are necessarily, but I represent everybody in Lincoln. And when they call or send emails to the city council, I respond.
All right. Well, you have been on the council for a while. What do you see right now as the most important issues? And they can be big things or they can be the nitty-gritty of running a city.
Well, the most important challenge I think we're facing right now is the Lincoln Police Department. We started this year with an authorized strength of 358 officers and a total of 330 on staff. In this point in time, we have 327 officers on staff, and we're scheduled to lose 10 more by the end of May. We've had 10 officers basically say they're moving on, either they're through retirement or moving to a different police department. This is a serious issue. I've been talking to the police department, police union. I've been talking to the leadership, different captains and directors in the police department. And there's some things that need to change in the Lincoln Police Department over the next few years. But none of those things can change unless we first start with adding more police officers. That's why I've called for adding 42 additional police officers over the next 5 years.
Hey, Roy, is that 42 on top of the authorized 358?
It's 42 on top of what we got now.
Okay.
Okay. It would be nice to be able to say we could do it on top of the 358, but that's not practical because we only train so many per year.
Right.
So you got to have a practical goals, or you just tilting at windmills at that point.
What I cut you off, so if you still had more to say, I'd be interested in that. But I did want to ask, or go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say about staffing levels. We have 1.14 officers per 1,000 residents of the city. That is the lowest in the state of Nebraska for cities over 5,000 population. Omaha, for example, is 1.89 officers per 1,000. this is becoming a danger to our police officers. It's certainly a morale issue. They are overburdened, and we need to take care of it. And so the other issues in the police department, we have for years and years, of course, as a small city grew, we've been a generalist police force, meaning every officer does every job, essentially. So it's not what you see on TV where the street cop finds the crime, finds the dead body or whatever, and then turns it over to detectives. That's a specialist model. The specialist model like Omaha has, and as cities become larger, it becomes imperative that we move to some kind of specialist model because otherwise the street cops can no longer do community policing because they're going from call to call to call. And when they're not on calls, they're doing paperwork, and when they're not doing paperwork, they're doing investigations of what they've already encountered. So that's one issue there, is somehow transitioning to a different form of how we do things away from the generalist officer. The next issue is leadership positions within LPD. A number of years ago, we eliminated lieutenants from our force as the rank between the captains and the sergeants. Those need to come back. In leadership, we know that one leader can effectively direct 5 to 7 people at the most. That's not the situation now. It's usually a dozen or more. I'll give you one example. Assistant chiefs. We have one assistant chief authorized, and that one assistant chief was supervising 21 people. We probably need 3 assistant chiefs. So we need to reorganize all those things, but all those efforts that we would need to take require more bodies, more qualified, trained officers. So that's one of the biggest things that forces that face our community right now, because it can come to a critical mass where you got officers who left to go to Omaha and they tell their buddies here, and this is happening now, by the way, officers who have left LPD are in Omaha saying, hey guys, it's really great over here at OPD, come join us. And the more people you have leave, the more greater the burden on the remainder. And then you start having people thinking, well, why should I stay and be the chump who's getting the short end of this thing? So it's important that we take action sooner rather than later on this issue. Other issues, housing affordability throughout the entire city, it's critical and important. If you were to remove government, take every government job at whatever level out of the picture, and then combine all of the people that work in the housing industry, whether they're bankers, lawyers, real estate agents, builders, developers, that would be the #1 industry in the city of Lincoln. And for years, I've been saying it's time to stop walking the racehorse. We need to expand opportunities for building. We need more buildable lots that have services hooked up to them. That's a critical element of our economy, and building more places to live will take pressure off, especially the lower end. So that's another big thing. And I talked to the board before about this, but a long-term vision of a couple of things. We got to have water from the Missouri. That's critical for our growth and development. And back 6 years ago, we were being told, hey, water from the Missouri by 2040, or we'll be capping our growth. Now, there are some things that have mediated that, because we do have some better water conservation measures in place because of the drought we faced. However, we still need water from the Missouri. Another issue is flooding. We have the Salt Creek. I think it's important that I've been working with Olson and Associates for about 4 years now, looking at a model where we could do detention and diversion projects along every branch of the Salt Creek. That if that were to be completed, we would have removed 90% of the property in Lincoln that's in the floodplain now out of the floodplain. The story of water is the story of the West. The old saying is whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. It's because you either had too much or not enough. So I think those are the biggest issues facing us, plus the East Bypass. We're on our way to the South Beltway, and that was one of my big issues when I first ran. I think we can say it's all over there except for the finishing of it. The money's committed, but we now need to put our attention directly to the East Bypass. The South Beltway is going to drive a lot of growth in our city, jobs and expansion of businesses. And once we get the East Bypass completed, And we'll have that highway ring around the city, which will enable us to become a truly modern city. So those are the issues I think that are really facing. There's some short-term issues and some long-term issues. One thing I want to follow up on public safety though, is we have, I think, some serious issues with Lincoln Fire and Rescue. We do need another station down south central, and that should be a truck company. That's the ladder trucks. In the 1960s, we had 4 ladder company trucks in the city of Lincoln, and today we still have 4. And it's not a good thing really, because the trucks, what they do is they do the rescue operations where the engines do the fire suppression operations. And at the point we are now, we sometimes have to wait a long time for a truck from one district to go to another district because the truck in the first district is occupied. So the other thing we need to do is I'd encourage the board members, if you get a chance, call up Chief Engler and go visit Station 8. That's at the corner of 17th and Van Dorn. And that was built on top of a cistern. And it's been settling for years. And you can go into the bay where they keep the fire engine. And it's so messed up in there, you can actually go up to a load-bearing wall and pull a cinder block out of the wall. They're in desperate straits there. And I've talked to Chief Engler and others, and we're working on a plan to build a new Station 8 right next door to it on parkland. And there can be a land swap involved, and Parks and Rec is involved in that. But we also need to add in our fire department. Right now, we send out engines and trucks with 3 people on a vehicle. We need to work consistently towards 4 people on a vehicle. That makes a lot more sense to me and to the fire union too.
All right, Roy, you've made it so I don't even really have to work at this interview. You covered everything. But you did say the magic word. I don't know if when you said water, if you saw Kent's eyes light up. Kent, did you have any follow-up questions on water?
Oh, of course. This is my thing. I am in full agreement about the water from the Missouri. Do you think, and this kind of ties into everything else, I guess, I see that and the flooding and this climate action plan all kind of interlocked in a way.
Yeah.
Do you think the Missouri thing can be done in conjunction with Omaha, or is this going to be the project that costs $1 billion for Lincoln?
It's not going to cost $1 billion for just Lincoln. First of all, I got to preface what I'm going to say here is, we have a deal in the works where we'll be able to get water from Omaha. And that only works as long as Omaha doesn't need all the water they have. So if we're in a drought condition where we desperately need the water, they probably desperately need it too. So we can't count on Omaha when the chips are down, really. But what we can count on when we bring water from Missouri is federal government help, Corps of Engineers help, and we can count on financial assistance from all the communities on the way, because they will benefit as well. So it's not a thing where the city of Lincoln, the citizens of Lincoln, have to pony up $1 billion. It's a long-term goal, and people, I don't know if people know this right now, but one of the things we've been doing consistently is as we increase our rates for water, because it's an enterprise fund that pays for itself, we have been I have a plan to put away money to begin this project of bringing water from Missouri. Because you know how it works. If you're going to buy something big, you got to start with some cash in hand. So we're working on that. It's a big project, but some things are so long term that they need attention. A lot of times politicians think in short terms. How about the next election? What's the next thing? But this is a long-term vision that has to be used. And when 6-7 years ago, when we were told, oh, we're going to need water from Missouri by 2040, that seemed like a long ways away. Well, 2040 doesn't seem that long away now. It's 19 years. And we need to start getting very serious about getting everybody involved who needs to be involved and getting that project laid out. First comes the engineering and the NEPA, the whole thing about environmental assessment.
And I agree with you on what you said about water being the story of the West. Be happy we're not in the Colorado Basin.
Oh, yes.
The other, I'm interested in the Salt Valley, the floodplain.
Right.
Is that an NRD? Will that be a joint thing with?
That would be joint with NRD and the city of Lincoln and probably the county. The thing I really like about this plan is you start as far upstream as you can, and you start working on those tributaries. As opposed to the east bypass, it's got to be 100% complete before it's useful. But working on this flood control, every discrete tributary that has a project completed adds its own benefit to the totality of our community. So, you get benefit at every step along the way.
And so that would start way in the south and maybe out of the county even.
Correct. You gotta start with water projects like that. You must start upstream. Starting downstream just causes problems.
Yeah.
All right.
I could ask you 100 questions about this, but
Sure.
But I'd have to use my mute button. So I try to use that power very judiciously. Roy, COVID has been a game-changing event for society. How has it affected the way you operate as a city council member, your notions about city government, and how will it impact city government going forward?
Well, that's an interesting question. The most obvious thing is in fact affected city government by having a lot more Zoom meetings like this. I think it lends itself to becoming less personal. It's not quite the anonymity of being online and typing something in, but it becomes less personal. So there's efforts that have to be made to keep it personal, because I believe that those personal relationships are critical to getting anything done, really, especially when you're trying to work across the aisle to see eye to eye on things. There have been a lot of disagreements in how we should proceed, even to this day. There are members of the public who are insisting, hey, we got to have greater access to come in and sit down in the city council chambers. We had disagreements beginning whether we could actually have Zoom city council meetings, and that was experimented with for a while, but the city attorney told us we absolutely could not, in spite of what the governor said, that they were not prepared to be able to defend the city if we held council meetings by Zoom. So we no longer do that. In the future, I think we will be better prepared for an event like this. And hopefully it never happens. The last one happened in 1918, over 100 years ago. So we'll have lessons learned, but the great challenge, I think, is to write those lessons down somewhere where they won't be forgotten, and perhaps change some ordinances on how things will happen in the future. Not sure how that will look, but I got a military background, 6 years as an officer in the Army. And one of the things you do when something's over is you do called an after action report. You go back and you look at everything that happened. What did you do well? What could you do better? And what changes should we make now for the next event? So I think that's the next thing we have to do as a city government. When we can, put a period at the end of this thing, do an after action report.
Maybe this question is an offshoot of that, but lots of candidates, lots of politicians talk about transparency and accountability. Accessibility to government has been a topic for some folks in the last many months. Are there changes that you think should be made, need to be made to make government more transparent, more accountable, or more accessible to folks?
I think the first thing we need to do as elected officials is make ourselves more fully aware of what the rules really are. There was a gentleman testifying in front of city council just this week saying, hey, guess what the accountability disclosure law says, the Open Meetings Act says about limiting access into this city hall during any time period, during meetings. And he made some very good points that we need to know what the exceptions can be to be transparent. And, you know, we've got a lot of citizens who are upset about the fact that they believe the city government has not been transparent. And in some ways, I agree with them. We need to do better in being transparent to the public. So begin with having the city council members and the mayor and the directors be more fully aware of what the rules really are, and also have a commitment to the First Amendment. I think that's key to making things happen the way they should for citizens, for the government, for the press. We need to I think a rededication is a good way to say it, to the principles enshrined in the First Amendment.
Well, that's always going to go over well with the crowd like you're talking to right now, Roy. I have one final question that I will hold off on. I wanted to see if any of the other board members have a question for you. John.
Yeah, Roy, I've asked every candidate this. What is the right balance to address the housing shortage as it relates to building infill housing in the city while meeting and respecting the desires of the residents who live in the areas that are going to be developed in that manner?
Okay, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I believe that we do need to be adding buildable lots on the edges of the city, and that will take the pressure off of the infill thing, because we have focused so much on infill and density that it does cause some friction with some of the established neighborhoods. There's some policies the city has that I disagree with, I think need to go away to help relieve the pressure on the housing market. One is we need to really engage with SIDs. Other communities across the state use SIDs effectively. We had one failed experiment with the Highlands years and years ago, and so everybody's afraid. Let's not touch that. But it is an effective way of taking care of infrastructure and putting that burden on the people who build the homes, build these new neighborhoods. And when those are paid for, those infrastructures are paid for, then the city can annex without any additional expense of improving those infrastructures. One of the things we have right now is we annex someplace, it's already built up. We go, oh no, look at this. They're not built to the standards the city has. They're built to county standards. This solves that. The other issue we need to take care of is we have a policy of contiguous growth. We don't annex land or allow things to be done further away. We don't allow gaps. We should take a look at that, because some places are more readily accessible for development than others. And if we say it has to be contiguous, we take those things out of the picture. Another policy we have is we have decided we will not allow lift stations. I don't know if you're familiar with lift stations, but it's very unsexy. It's where we take sewage and pump it up over a rise in the terrain, so it comes into our gravity-filled system. We have a policy that says we don't do that, but it can be very cost-effective and built into the cost of new development. And you know, those things right there, if you were to implement all those things, it would loosen up a lot of the pressure. I talk to home builders all the time. They say, you know, 15 years ago, if we were building 10 homes, 8 of them or 9 or 7 of them would be inside the city limits of Lincoln. And today it's exactly flipped. Only 2 or 3 would be inside the city limits because of the cost of lots and the scarcity of lots. So that's where I think we are.
All right. Well, you're right. I don't know that lift stations are sexy, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions before I ask my last one? All right. Well, Roy, we got 5 or 6 minutes left. You don't have to take them all, but the last question I always ask is, what didn't we ask that we ought to know about you, policy positions, your views? Sort of a wild card. Where did we blow the interview that you won?
Well, I don't know if you blew the interview, but I'll say this, that a lot of people wonder about my politics sometimes, because I come at it from very different directions from time to time. And I think that, you know, because sometimes the left is guessing, what is he doing? You know, because I came after buses and I came after saying we got to improve StarTran. It was Carl Eskridge and I that spearheaded the new 4-stage plan that we have for buses. I was the first one to say we need CNG buses, and I pressured City Hall, and we got CNG buses. I actually made the deal with Black Hills Energy to convert our first 2 buses to CNG. The real secret to all that, I guess, is that I am at heart a libertarian. I tend to approach things from that perspective, and because of that, I can come at issues from different viewpoints than most people expect from a Republican.
All right. Anything else to add?
No, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And everybody who wasn't on when Dave and I first started, I'm feeling fine.
All right. Well, it's good to see you. And we thank you for your time today, Roy. We thank you for your public service and your desire to run again. We appreciate everybody who runs for office because it enhances the conversation. And that's what's very important to us. So thanks a bunch. And we will see you later.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Roy.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.